Welcome to the TRICHOMES Weekly Roll Up, where we cover the latest in legalization topics and cannabis news headlines. This week, we are joined by special guest Maha Haq, Director of Retail Strategy for Green Thumb Industries and Managing Partner for the Highspitality Group, who is the founder of Cannaclub, the first cannabis student organization available to University of California system students. Maha has experience in retail dispensaries and consumption lounges, and today we will be learning more about the cannabis industry through her lens, exploring retail strategy and differences between consumption events and lounges. Please join us in giving a warm welcome to Maha. And now, here are your hosts, John Bond, Jared Duggins, and Maha Haq.
What's going on?
Hey
there.
Everyone.
How y'all doing?
Doing good.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday indeed.
TGIF.
TGIF indeed. Welcome to the podcast, Maha. We're stoked to have you here.
Stoked to be here.
Absolutely.
You know, it's been a while, but we put out a press release on it went right back at the beginning of the pandemic, highlighting the group and the college group, and you know, it's been quite some time, but look at where you've gone since then, Maha.
Right? Oh man, like right before COVID hit. Yeah, we were kind of full force with our student group initiatives, and we were having all these events, and you know, gotta thank you again, like for really putting us out there too. Like we really appreciated the love, and you know, the press release was so great. You know, it was such a monumental release too, because it was both UCLA and USC coming together on one thing for once. So we brought them together. So that was a great piece, a great opportunity to be highlighted by you guys. Very serendipitous to be right before the pandemic, but now we're here. We're on the tail ends of it now.
Right.
Knock on wood. I think we're close. We have to be.
Yeah.
They just dropped the mask mandate here in California anyway. So I mean.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, Maha, for the listeners out there, because I know that's actually the way that we connected initially, right? I'd love if you gave a 30,000-foot high level on kind of how you got to where you're at today, because obviously outside of know each other for a couple of years, I think you've had one of the cooler journeys in the space for sure. Totally.
Well, thank you. Oh gosh, it kind of cool, but if you really want to start from the true beginnings, I was caught smoking weed by my mom when I was a teenager. You know, I was a very bad kid. I do not condone underage cannabis consumption, by the way, but I was caught. My mom couldn't even ground me because at that point I'm like, I'm not even gonna go anywhere. So so what really sparked my interest was, hey, let's write a report. My mom's like, write a report, make this your homework. You need to come back to me with like reasons why you think this is even okay to do. So she's a clinical researcher. She works in cancer, and I wanted to go all out. I wrote her a 20-page report and cited medical journals like JAMA, PubMed, all sorts of things, really backing the claims of cannabis being a form of treatment for cancer patients, and you know, a whole bunch of other ailments too, just to kind of bring it together for her. And she was impressed. Thankfully, she took my work seriously, even though I was a troublesome teenager. But she invited me to speak at the hospital she works at, and I was a volunteer there as well. And I held a very small seminar of sorts where I was teaching 7 patients and 2 physicians how to roll a joint and like what your options are for consumption methods, because not every patient is going to smoke. So we talked about edibles, and that was my first public speaking engagement. And I was 17, like shy of 18, but I was like pretty young, and that was a catalyst to really moving forward in this space. Because as soon as I turned 18, and back then this was allowed, but I got a job at my local shop. I'm like, I have to work here and continue helping patients out because there's not enough information easily out there for patients, because doctors, physicians weren't giving that information. This was back in 2012. So, you know, things were acceptable in the Los Angeles area as it pertains to cannabis, but it you know, still was a bit taboo, at least in the medical side. And yeah, it's like 2 or 3 days after I turned 18, I got a job. I'm like, I'm going to work in this space. I'm going to keep at it. And then from there on, a majority of my experience is on the dispensary side, but I took the initiative to try to work in different sectors within cannabis to understand the entire supply chain, to not only see where I fit in, but to understand the atmosphere right before adult use legalization came in, and to observe whatever differences came about post recreational legalization. So that was my goal. Hit every sector, as many as I could. I even went as far as working at a testing lab, because that was the only sector I hadn't touched and wasn't part of a vertically integrated business. So I really wanted to go all out, see what I could, where I fit in, and learn as much as I could. And simultaneously, I was attending school. Took me a while to get my undergrad, but I got my undergrad from UCLA, and that's where I founded Cannaclub. It's a cannabis student organization. I like to think it's the first. It coincides with a few other groups and trade orgs that started as well, but it is the first student organization focused on cannabis that started. And I wasn't allowed to start it at UCLA until adult use was passed in 2018. I always posed arguments like, you have a wine club, you have a beer brewing for Bruins club, like you have all these different, clubs that are, for alcohol. Why not weed? So they couldn't say anything against me in 2018. So that's when we finally set up, and Cannaclub just exponentially grew since then. We're registered in 26 universities, so not just in California. We're in a couple of states too. So that was my passion project. Obviously, I've passed the baton now, but it was a great learning experience, and it just paired so well with my job life. So I had my school life, I had my job life, and then the bridge together was Cannaclub. So it was the best time, honestly. One of the most formative in my cannabis career, moments ever.
Totally. Yeah, it's always and to that point, and a compliment that I would extend, right, is refusing to be denied in terms of getting into the space and making the waves that you want to, right? I think it's like a saying, and I have no idea who said it, so I always have to preface that this is being pulled from somewhere back in the back of my brain, but it's like the experiences shape the journey, but the passion lights the way. And I think that's a really good example of understanding that this is something that so many people collectively feel passionate about. And the more you inspire folks to be in that way, it's really leaving the industry in a better place as a whole, which, to not steal your thunder, I think that led to other things in your career, obviously, and opportunities as well. If I'm not mistaken, which I know I'm not.
No, that's very nice, John. I love weed, and I wanted to formalize my passion. And I went as far as going to grad school to study cannabis as well, more on the pharmacological side. So I do have my master's from University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. That was the first school to ever have a graduate level program focused on cannabis sciences and therapeutics. So I wanted to keep going. I think I'm gonna be in this forever. This is my thing. This is my jam.
Totally.
But I have a lot of passion and respect for the plant, and thank you for recognizing that, man.
100%. Listen, I say all the time.
My 10th year anniversary in cannabis in a few months, in May.
10 might as well be 50 years at the way that this industry progresses. I know, for me, I could never go back to HR tech. I mean, what are you talking about? After living in this world that we get to live in every single day, and not to in any sort of way, getting my parents on board. And my mom's always like, you make me sound like I really didn't support you. No, I was very supported. I don't want to say that I wasn't, right? But when you talk about changing people's opinions of something that has been instilled over such a long period of time, that's never an easy thing to do. And I think that, the more that we can collectively continue to get the right information out there, because 2012, we were still pretty new to having smartphones and instant information access out there. And so the more that we can get the correct information out there, as opposed to all the things that exist today, I think it continues to support that initiative too.
100%. Well, and Maha, again, a tribute to you is the level of learning alongside of experience building. That's hey, that's the initiative you took, the hustle it took to do what you're doing and to end up where you are right now is few took that path, and realistically, you were there at Maryland when it was the incubator program or the first year. I remember you graduating into that and having something to do with the transference of Cannaclub to the East Coast as well. So,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, again, kudos. And, that leads to today's conversation and your relevance in the industry and why you're at a place such as GTI and woke Green Thumb Industries for, everybody on our channel knows who you are, or knows who Green Thumb Industries is. So I don't think there's too much introduction there.
No, yeah, I'm with GTI now, Green Thumb Industries, one of the top MSOs, one of the top cannabis companies in the world. It's seriously like an amazing opportunity to be here. Quite serendipitous how it happened. So during the pandemic, of course, some of us got, laid off, furloughed, what have you. I was one of them, from the testing lab. Much love to them still, but shit happens.
Sure.
So during the pandemic, I actually, in a very spontaneous, serendipitous fashion, got connected with who was my business partner, Sarah Stewart. So she had worked at the first consumption lounge that opened in West Hollywood, previously known as the Lowell Cafe, now called the OG Cannabis Cafe. So she was a manager there, and I actually got to work on license applications for consumption lounges in the city of West Hollywood. So we both connected on that and went forward with a consultancy called Highspitality, where we focused primarily on consumption lounges and social consumption experiences through events, activations, what have you. So that was a very interesting entrepreneurial journey that we took together. And it was actually very interesting, given that there were some movement happening, even despite of COVID, when it came to the licenses in West Hollywood. And even in Michigan, Detroit specifically had announced that they were going to allow consumption lounges. But then the thick of COVID really hit, which was like end of 2020. And that's when everything was very uncertain, and just didn't really know what next steps were really for anyone. So we primarily consulted on operations and operational preparedness and just compliance and business development. So we were, I guess, too early, considering that a lot of people were just unable to make movement. And that's when GTI hit us up. They're like, we are going to have a consumption lounge, but not anytime soon, but we would love to keep you guys around. So we said, all right, sure. But they were opening a new shop in my hometown, Pasadena, California, Essence in Pasadena. So Pasadena is where I started working, in cannabis. The first shop I worked, the first few shops I worked at were in Pasadena. So when I told them, hey, I am from this town, let me know if you guys need anything. So that's when our engagement began. They ended up being our best client. It was such a great experience to be back at my stomping grounds. It literally came full circle, almost on my 9-year anniversary in cannabis, I am opening up a adult use legal shop in the same city where I was working at shops that were either medical or just not legitimate. So it's crazy how that came full circle, and it was through GTI, and it was a great experience, great learning experience, and loved the team. So it only felt natural to join them full time, especially because I also got to help out Sarah with opening up the consumption lounge we have in the suburbs of Chicago. So that spot is open. So California not making too much movement on the lounge scene, but
Sure.
I did make some moves in Illinois. So that lounge, it's our Smoke Easy. It is adjacent to our flagship dispensary location, Rise in Mundelein. So it's a proper lounge. You can have non-alcoholic beverages, but you can have sodas, you can have some snacks alongside with just dabs on your Puffco or Dr. Dabber, or you can have a bong rip from like Sessions or a Student Glass. So we have all these devices and options to choose from, and it's just been great just seeing the transition, like working on this one shop, quickly having to work on this lounge. Now I'm full time and employed with them. Now I've been to, or I've worked on 3 different states within my 2 months, and it's been crazy expansion. So it was very gradual, but it was such a nice intro to corporate cannabis. So this is my first
Sure.
first take or first-hand experience with corporate anything. I've never worked for a company with more than 200 employees. So it's
Mhm.
different. It's different. You know, some people have said that, oh, Maha, are you selling out? And I'm like, honestly, I don't feel like that because I love the culture at GTI. And I really think we care about having good products and providing a great retail experience. So I'm enjoying it. Yeah. In summary, I'm
Absolutely.
enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the exact same way. It's one of those things where we at Dutchy have built a really big company out of what was once a really small one, and we try to operate in the same way. And I think that one thing that's really cool, and I've noticed this in working with GTI and yourself over the years, right, is it's like understanding that the intersection of like commercial retail and cannabis are like a fast colliding course, and it's an inevitable thing that they're going to continue to cross paths. And so taking a delicate understanding of both sides and like whereas like you can't lean too hard into one way or the other or you alienate the other side of it. Now, one day we'll all be swimming in the same pond and I can't wait for that. Right. And it's going to be a super exciting thing. But I think it's like, companies like GTI and like cool concepts, which kind of leads into like one of the first things I wanted to talk about that are helping bridge that gap for a lot of people emotionally with the plant. Right. Is it's not like this, like, let's talk really quietly and whisper about this and go buy our weed in a parking lot like we used to, allegedly. Right. And it's kind of one of those things. So, that being said, you've seen now the gambit and you've been out there and, pushing forward new things. What are some of the more innovative practices that are occurring on the retail side of cannabis?
Oh gosh. So innovation, big piece. So what I'm seeing, well, not just with GTI, but what other MSOs and other larger emerging retail groups are doing is partnering up with non-cannabis folks. So
Mhm.
just yesterday, there was a press release about Uber Eats, or rather Tokyo Smoke, the retailer in
Mhm.
Canada,
Yep.
partnering with Uber Eats. So it's it's very interesting to finally see these non-cannabis companies being open to cannabis companies now. I think those partnerships are so strategic and are going to be so mutually beneficial. It's a win-win situation, and I think that's going to be the future of it. I know there has been some attempts before on trying to bridge traditional retail with cannabis retail. One example to share is what Barney's did in Beverly Hills. They had
Mhm.
the top floor next to the male's shoe section called the High End, which was a boutique cannabis I guess shopping experience of sorts. Like it wasn't a dispensary, but you could order cannabis from there through a delivery service partner, and then you had all these
That's right.
ancillary product offerings as well. So that was back in 2019, but
Mhm.
I think that was too ahead of its time because I feel like if you start doing that now and start exploring those traditional retail partnerships now, I think there's going to be more movement for it. So the High End, they opened up before COVID hit, and Barney's got a pretty big hit from COVID as well. So like they've had to shut down several locations,
Sure.
including that same one. But now I think is a perfect time to start looking at traditional retail partners, whether it's actual retailers or even restaurants. So just the other day, there's another press release about a dispensary in the LA area, Culver City, opening up their shop next to or in a strip center next to all these green themed restaurants. Like there's sweet green,
Mhm.
there's tender greens, like there's all, like it's quite a healthy food strip center, but a dispensary just opened between them. So I feel like there's just going to be a lot of those partnerships coming up, more formalized partnerships coming about through that. So there's already a lot of activity in Canada. But, Fire and Flower has their partnership with Circle K, Tokyo Smoke doing it with Uber Eats. It's federally legal there, so they have more leeway, but it's going to happen here too.
That's what I was going to say. On the weekly roll up, we cover a lot of federal legalization, that kind of stuff. And would you say that the biggest difference between Canada's involvement in Uber Eats and big public companies is that federal legalization portion?
Yeah, I think
and
so.
their
It's
ability?
definitely a factor in why they're more why these other non-cannabis companies are keen on it. But I think state by state, there's going to be some traditional retailers that will jump the gun before federal happens. So yeah,
Sure.
we're kind of seeing it here and there. But can it be executed properly if it's not federally legalized? Yeah, there's some work to be done, obviously.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting because there's little pockets, and I'm a firm believer that people are always going to push the envelope as much as they can. And that's really one of the beautiful things about innovation, right? Is like it's not nefarious to try and find new ways to do something, right?
Yeah.
And I think as regulation, especially in California, for those examples, I remember reading that article and I was like, in 2019 when they opened like the dispensary without a storefront, right? And there's no cannabis sold there. It's all packaging. And I was like, what an idea, right? Because the way that they have it set up from a regulation standpoint, you can get delivery wherever you're at, right? So what's the difference from a technology side if you're able to receive that order in a compliant way? And like those kinds of cool concepts, I'm like super stoked on. I remember being at like, in terms of like non-endemic brands versus endemic brands and cannabis versus not, right? In Canada, when I was up there for like a conference, probably, I don't know, like 6-8 months ago, I was at a sponsored lunch by FedEx, right? And they had like printed FedEx cards, and it was literally FedEx.ca, not com, FedEx.ca/cannabis. And it was like ship your buds. And I was like, whoa, the day, like I remember specifically taking a picture and sending it to my parents. And I was like, hey, just so you know, if there's any doubt and legitimacy in what's happening right now, these are like the types of things that are coming. And I think like, to both of your points, it's the federal illegality of it and like, having shareholders and being these massive companies that they are, right? They're only getting involved in the way that they can while they can. But it's very clear that like when you see conversations from big companies like the Amazons of the world supporting cannabis legislation, no longer drug testing, that these larger companies that ultimately are steering the economy of which we live in, right, will continue to get behind it. I think you'll see more of those like crossover partnerships, if you will.
Oh man, but that thing out of the Biden administration presentation yesterday, right?
Sure.
Not sure how federal legalization is looking for us.
Yeah.
You cannot even invest in cannabis. I guess I can't work at, I know everyone is saying it, but I guess I can't work at the White House because I've got a stake in this. But
I think that ship sailed for me a long time ago anyways. You probably have a much better shot than I would, but you're exactly
I'd rather
right.
be in a greenhouse than a White House.
Exactly. Hey, that's
nice.
Totally.
I like that.
Oh, man.
What was this quote?
One more innovative practice I do want to share that I think is so beyond brand activations is retail activations. So as I feel like a lot of retailers either understand or don't understand that we have the ability to shape a trend. Like products are going to keep, busting out. We're going to always see crazy, cool, new, innovative products, but it's really the retailers that shape the trend. So retail activations, specifically, I'm seeing what, so Outside Lands, the festival, they had grasslands where you can like absolutely like buy cannabis at a festival instead of having to sneak it in your underwear. So it's so innovative to see it's traditional festivals, traditional entertainment getting with cannabis entertainment, or rather cannabis consumption and retail experience. Like you are retailing, you are transacting like, for cannabis. So I'm seeing a big future in initiatives and innovative practices like that. So I know Ease and Embark, these retailers in California, they're the ones who were involved in grasslands and setting that up. And, I really see a future in that. Like Rolling Loud is literally about rolling weed and promoting cannabis culture through music. And there hasn't been any formalized legal cannabis transactions at those festivals, but you're seeing booths. Packwoods had a booth, and I only see the inevitable future being having essentially a bar, like just like the alcohol bar, you have a spot to just buy cannabis, and that in itself is a retail experience. So I don't know. I'm really looking forward to traditional industry partnerships with cannabis.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and when you think about like in your time, right? Because it's the industry has changed so much in such a short period of time, and I feel like and I always have to be careful how I word this, right? Like in light of the pandemic, cannabis retailers and cannabis companies were far more inclined to focus on process because you needed to be, especially in terms of the ways that like a lot of states set forward your ability to stay open, right? So like in your 10 years in cannabis, right, and especially focusing on retail for the last, X amount of time, what would be some like retail strategy takeaways that you would say you've had over the years?
Ooh, oh man, retail strategy takeaways. Just if you're doing expansion, do it right, man. I feel like a lot of folks try to expand and they don't think it well enough. Like there's so many restrictions to expanding at the right place at the right time. That's really what it is. Like your shop's not going to do well if you're not at the right place at the right time.
Sure.
That's, kind of partly why GTI is not looking into California just yet. It's really not the right place and it's not the right time. That's like the most summarized takeaway I can say is you got to have the right spot, the right real estate, right place, and it has to be at the right time, whether it's, through traditional license application route or if it's through an M&A route. Like you really have to time it right. If you're going to come into a market where there's 100 shops already, you kind of missed your boat unless you have a strategy, an effective expansion strategy. So yeah, really right place, right time. But I will say there's two major components to retail strategy that I've learned recently. And one being the people side, and then the second being the customer side. And under people, you need to have an amazing team, a tip-top shape team. If you don't have team, man, if your GM sucks or if your bartender sucks, you're not gonna have a good shop. People are not gonna come back. So you have to have a solid team. And another part is education. You really need to have an educated team. You can have the best team ever to do your work, but if they're not educated, then are your patients and customers going to come back? If you're educating your team, they're going to feel motivated. So like emphasis on team and education under the people part. And then on the customer side, it's assortment. You need to have a variety of great products, great selection. I want to carry what you want and what your mama wants at my shop. You can have too much product at times, but you want to have product breadth and product depth. So assortment is very important. And the last point is experience. So customer journey, customer experience, the omni-channel experience, linking and connecting all the dots, whether it's through the in-store customer journey experience or whether it's the online ordering experience. And I know, you guys at Dutchie, John, like y'all are like always trying to refine that ordering experience. And, that's something we're looking forward to is really refining that as well on our end. We want to have seamless ordering. Like if it's like a hassle to order something, whether it's in person or online, like I'm going to lose a sale. Like
Sure.
I'm not going to get to keep that sale going. So that is that's a very important component. So there's 4 points that I mentioned. So people, team, education, assortment, and the omni-channel experience.
And it's so funny how like those all play into one another too, because at the core of the team, right? You have to have a team that enjoys showing up to work every day. And that's almost entirely on you as an employer, right? And having an opportunity to say, okay, we're going to build an environment that people feel supported and safe in, right? It's one of those things that you honestly, you can't, you could have a great product selection, but when the customer comes into the dispensary and they're feeling not the best vibe from the staff because the staff's not happy to be there, and they're like, all right, I've got 3 hours till I can get out of here. There's a dramatic difference between that and when you walk in, people are so stoked to talk to you about what you want and understand like what your particular reason for being there. And that in itself is just a ripple effect. And it all comes back to like, I always say, if you want to see the diversity of an industry, go sit in a dispensary lobby for an hour and watch different types of people that walk in there. And knowing that you're catering to that many different types of folks, everything centers from like a passion for like being there, right? It's like everyone there at the dispensary is either really interested in cannabis or they're working there because they love cannabis. And it's like, you'll get something out of somebody that you can't get in a way that if they were just showing up to a job. And it's really making sure that you like inspire that as an employer, without a doubt.
Big time.
Yeah. No, most definitely. And that's actually a very interesting point you bring up, John. Like, you have all types of people coming into a shop. Like, there's no
Totally.
single demographic that you can pinpoint to. It's really very diverse. Even if there is a certain demographic that you are primarily serving, it's seriously all types of people from all walks of life. Like, if I go into, let's say, if I go into like a Forever 21, I'm only going to see a bunch of girls and a couple guys, but I'm not gonna see the same diversity as I do at a shop. So like
Totally.
that's really what's unique about the retail cannabis experience. You have to be prepared. Like the staff has to be prepared for any type of person and understand that we are all here for one single thing, and that's weed.
Totally. And depending on where you're at, over half of those folks are in a dispensary for the first time.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I know we take it for granted that I've been in thousands of dispensaries, and I consider that like an immense privilege that I've been able to enjoy in my life. And there's days where I'm just like, oh, I gotta go buy the dispensary. And it's like, what am I really talking about here? Whereas, like, even now, like, you bring someone that hasn't been to a dispensary and their eyes light up and they're like, wait a minute, we can like openly talk about cannabis in here and we can ask questions and I can smell jars. And it's just like, it's an entirely different thing. And I think that's such a unique thing that doesn't exist a lot of places anymore. There's not a lot of mystery in the world today, right? Like, it's like everything is pretty out in the open. And so like to go experience something new like that doesn't really exist a lot of places in a way that it does here,
Yeah.
at least in my opinion.
Well, yeah. Well, people are still getting arrested in certain states. There's no legal. I mean, it's
still sitting in jail. Totally.
Horrible in that disparity right there. But that also brings up a good point. Is we talk about this every day. We live this every day. This is what we chose to do for a living, and hey, we really enjoy it. But there's a lot of people out there that really a consumption lounge, right? What does that mean versus consuming at an event versus what you guys were just talking about? A strategy where you're doing a retail activation at an event, and that's one of the things I know from Highspitality and what you were doing with the consumption lounges. I had a little foray into Vegas's first failed attempt at doing the consumption lounges before that kind of went away. And yeah, there's a lot to figure out. So what is the main difference between consumption lounges and just consuming at events?
Sure. So consumption lounges are licensed establishments that you can legally smoke or consume cannabis at and buy cannabis at. So it is similar to a retailer where you can buy cannabis, but you can also consume cannabis at designated areas. So whether that is consuming inhalables like joints, bongs, dabs, what have you, or if it's consuming edibles, like there's like all methods of consumption are accepted depending on the license type, the city, however it's regulated. One example is West Hollywood. They had separated their consumption lounge licenses by consumption type, and that was smoking and inhaling and edibles only. But they consolidated the two, considering that we should not have to separate consumption methods of the same exact product essentially. So I'm happy about that consolidation, but they still have put in effect designated areas that you can only smoke at and designated areas where you can have edibles only at. So, it's a balancing act, but that is the key difference between a consumption lounge and a consumption event. Lounge is a licensed establishment, an event. There's all types of events. There are licensed events, at least in California, through an event organizer's license. But there's also private events where anything kind of goes, just like any other house party or private party or whatever. Like you can kind of consume anything. You can have camel meat for all I care. But yeah, that's the difference between an event and a lounge. So the lounge, they're open whatever their business hours are, but they're usually open just like a dispensary. They operate during business hours. Event is a one-time thing. So there is seemingly a little more overhead with a consumption lounge just because it is a business, it is an establishment, and an event, it's, a gig, it's temporary. But yeah, those are some of the key differences.
Totally. Yeah, it's I'm really excited to see as some of these like consumption concepts, I should say, continue to get baked out. No pun intended. Little dad joke for you there. It just I like the innovation that you're starting to see, and like you think about like edibles and like the logic behind certain regulation, right? And everyone's doing the best they can with the information they have available, right? But to think like if you're in a consumption lounge environment, it's one of those things where like you don't really want to rush the customer. You're not trying to churn and burn folks the same way you would like a restaurant, in terms of like a casual dining environment. And additionally, if there are edibles being made with like nano emulsification and things that would hit you quickly, and like cannabis drinks, which are great, but the ideal experience would be like going to a lounge, eating an edible, and then not hitting you until you've been gone for an hour. It kind of defeats the purpose of it. And so I'm really excited to continue to see like innovation around products and like retail experience as it relates to consumption lounges and consumption like I guess events, I should say, because I think those are going to continue. Like there will be products that are specifically designed for consumption on site at an event, which is really cool. And I just think it's like that ripple effect of like cool things breeding other cool things, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, no, I love that you brought up the nano emulsified edibles, because we love those at the lounge. When we are setting up the assortment for a lounge, when we are bringing in products, we want to bring in consumption lounge friendly products. Fast reacting, we need that. We don't want you to sit around for an hour waiting for your edibles to kick in, because you're going to lose your table pretty soon, because you got to keep moving them just like a restaurant. We got 90-minute table limits, just like every other restaurant. So fast acting, very much love. Single serve products as well. Very, very, very much consumption lounge friendly. Like, there's one product that I'm going to shout out, Purewana. They have the singleton packets that you can just put in your drink, and they're singletons. They're very convenient, very popular. I had those at my wedding. We had a bar with this brand, and it was easy for everyone to administer that because it was single serve. So single serve options, very, very popular for the lounge, and fast reacting, definitely.
I know that within the studies that the DEA is doing and that kind of stuff, they're looking into intoxication and driving under the influence, that kind of stuff. Within consumption lounges, are you seeing any rules that have to do with Uber in, Uber out, or taxi in, taxi out, or not driving away from, or is that even being considered?
So that is a major concern for any city that is exploring consumption lounges. I would say that's actually one of the first initial concerns that comes up, is how are we going to control driving behind the wheel after leaving the consumption lounge? So just like we talked about the quick reacting edibles, that's, we want to keep promoting the fast reacting products, you come in, consume, wait a bit, like after you wait a bit, then you can leave sort of setup. It is tricky. It is, you are kind of on a fine line when you're dealing with this, but if someone's about to drive, we do urge our servers to ask, oh, will anyone be driving today? If so, let me know who it is. And then that server or that bud tender will be monitoring that person pretty closely. Like it is standard practice for all servers to monitor the patrons as closely as possible and to ask questions like, who's driving, or like which one of you guys brought your car, or did you guys get valet, whatever it may be, like trying to figure out who drove. And whoever did, making sure we're monitoring not only their cannabis consumption, but if they're drinking enough water, if they're getting enough fluids in. And if there is a case where someone needs a little bit of extra help besides just water, we do have electrolyte rich options that can help. It's not the most proven solution, but it does help, and we've seen it help people who really do need to get behind the wheel and sooner than we would prefer. But we always try to urge, stay your entire 90 minutes, because if you don't, you're going to put yourself at risk and put everyone else at risk. So we do have to recognize the risk. Even if some people do claim they drive better when they're high, we still can't support that. So
Sure.
the city wants us to, all these different cities, all these different legislators, they want us to monitor our patrons to the best of our ability and make sure they're hydrated or fed before going on the wheel.
Because they do that at every bar they serve alcohol, right? Oh yeah, no, they make sure that we monitor all the drinks that somebody has.
Oh man, exactly.
Yeah.
Like they don't have bars doing that, man.
Right. And I say that all the time. It's like one thing that I really hope that we continue to push forward on is like, seeing lounges start to pop up in Vegas now, and they're going to pop up in Vegas, and that's a really exciting thing. And everyone thinks of Vegas in a certain way, right? There's a very specific reason why cannabis isn't allowed on casino properties in Las Vegas. A lot of that being driven behind the idea that it's not federally legal, gaming is federally regulated, but it's also not something that's going to keep people gambling. And that entire city is built on gambling, right? So like, so much of the conversation around this with legislators, from my opinion, in my humble opinion, I should say, is the idea that the liability of such, and like thinking about like, people leave bars, and as much as we would like to think this never happens, people leave bars under the influence all the time and get behind the wheel of their car. And very seldom will you ever see a news story that they said, this person was overserved at this bar and it was the bar's fault and that's the reason they got in the wreck. But I promise you, the first time that somebody leaves a consumption lounge and they get in trouble and they're going to say they were overserved at this place for this reason, and that's a very like a telling point of like where we're at in the times, and it's getting better, right? But like even something like having someone sign waivers and communicating openly, like, you did not drive here. Want to know that if you came here, you took an Uber, Lyft, whatever, who knows what that's going to be like, right? And it's like, in my mind, that's so damaging and invasive to the customer experience. But when you're in this like weird purgatory of like, is like, people are starting to accept it. It's like, it's going to be interesting to see how things move and shake along the way, in my mind, at least.
Oh yeah. No, that's I'm hoping there's some improvements on that end. But speaking of Vegas, GTI, we own Cookies on the Strip in Vegas, and we will be opening up a lounge pretty soon. It's in the works. There's some build outs needed, but we're going to have a lounge. It's going to be Cookies on the Strip Lounge, and that's super exciting. I'm very excited to see how that's going to tie in with, the alcohol side. Honestly, we can't obviously sell alcohol, but you can like walk in public with your Fat Tuesdays and just, slurping on your frozen margarita for like 10 hours. So like, I'm curious to see how that's going to mesh with cannabis consumption. People do like to be cross-faded, but I'm interested in seeing how the culture evolves in Vegas with both alcohol and cannabis, because it's going to happen. Even if you don't allow it in your establishment, it's going to happen. It happens with me sometimes. I'm on both substances subconsciously, just without knowing, like, oh shit, I just had a drink and I just smoked a joint. Damn. So I am
Totally.
interested in seeing that.
Without a doubt. By the way, I'm like on air, like inviting myself to the grand opening of the Cookies on the Strip Consumption Lounge. I just wanted to
Oh
make
my
sure that like
gosh.
I put that in the bucket. But like you're exactly right,
Got
because
it.
it's because like in Nevada you can't consume cannabis out in public, and that's really one of the things. Like it hasn't been as well communicated that yes, you can buy cannabis here, but you can't smoke it in public. And there's just people just waiting with ticket pads, sitting outside waiting for someone to walk by smoking a joint. Here's a $40 ticket. Here's a $40 ticket, and it's like, you know, I think in as much as I'd say it, everything's driven by money anyways, and they realize this is very good for tourism, which the town is as well. I think we'll see some improvement there, or at least we can hope to, right? But it's going to be a really cool thing, especially with like, you know, an iconic place like the Las Vegas Strip having something front and center like that. I mean, that's really like the announcement to the world that cannabis is normalized and getting closer to it, you know?
Right. Absolutely. And it gives people a chance to experience something else in Vegas, as to where before basically you were at risk of getting thrown out of a hotel or needing to go stand on the road out off of the hotel property. Where else did they tell me to go smoke weed? Everywhere but on the hotel property, right? So now you have somewhere that you can go, you can consume, you can kind of take in the Vegas atmosphere for something else too.
Yeah, and they even have those signs in the hotel rooms with like a "do not smoke marijuana" sign. Like it used to be like this is non-smoking, but now they have explicit signage in each hotel room with a placard with a "do not" and like a pot leaf. So it's like interesting to see that. So
a little a pro tip, and you didn't hear me say this as I say it on air, but there is one hotel on the Vegas Strip with balconies, and I'll let everyone do their own research. But I will say that I've been stopped walking through the lobby of a hotel before, not thinking anything of it, with like an unopened bag of edibles. And I got into, probably goes without saying, I've never been one to like, I've never been a big establishment person. We'll call it what it is, right? And somebody stopping me in the lobby and saying, "Excuse me, can I look inside your bag?" And I was like, "For what reason?" And clearly I'm carrying like, a name of a brand that I'm not going to mention because it's not whatever. And they're like, "You know what? I'm going to write you first and final. What room number are you staying in?" I go, "First and final warning for what?" And they said, "For bringing narcotics on property." And I said, "Now hang on a second."
Wow.
I said, "This is an unopened bag of edibles that is not even like out in public view. You asked to see inside my bag, and now you're going to write me a final warning." And like, it was one of those twitch moments where I was like, do I really have time for this today? And I could see in the guy's eyes that he's obviously just doing his job. And so I backed off entirely, and I was like, "You know what? Here's my edibles, throw them away, whatever." Because again, he didn't want to be having that conversation any more than I did. And I could see that in his eyes while we were talking through it. I was like, this is clearly not going to be solving the problem for me to tell this person why this is so incorrect. But that's where you think about like that type of confusion around things is really just like it's doing more harm than good. So hopefully, again, like I'm optimistic that there's been a really strong business case, especially in places like Nevada that are tourist heavy, that that lightening of regulation is going to help things tremendously. But time will tell with that. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely.
Yep, you bet. So in terms of like one thing I'd be curious about, Maha, is like in your experience, like I've been some lounges in California. Candidly, I've never been to another lounge. I've been to one that was in Oregon that was not above board. That was awesome. I'll be honest, I had a great time. But like, what are some differences in the atmosphere of lounges? State to state. Obviously, Illinois is the New York of the Midwest, right? So like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I'm going to start off with California just because there's so many differences just within the state from city to city. So the consumption lounges in SF, they're, I don't want to say glorified, but they're cigar lounges, cigar lounge style, tobacco lounge style. But in West Hollywood, you can offer food. You can have a kitchen on site and have food there. And Lowell Cafe, now known as OG Cannabis Cafe, they actually had a liquor license, very, very, like, essentially under the same roof, but they got away with it because there were 3 different parcels on that particular land. So even the bathroom had a different address, which is kind of funny. But they had a liquor license on one of them. And that was the side where you could not consume cannabis at, because you have to designate up to 1,500 square feet for smoking, X amount of feet for edibles,
Totally.
Depending on your license type. So the part that was not allocated to the smoking zone, they put a bar. So that kind of flew by in West Hollywood, but that would not happen in SF. And likewise for food production. You can produce food in a commercial kitchen in West Hollywood. You can't in SF. So it's interesting to kind of see that. And I do hope, like, at least within the state of California, there's more of a standard between all cities instead of it being different. But who am I kidding? And nothing is standardized in California, which kind of sucks. But seeing what Nevada is doing, they have made it so if you can only have one consumption lounge for your one dispensary. If you have multiple dispensaries, you cannot have a consumption lounge attached to that. You can only choose one. So we GTI, we have 10 plus dispensaries, Essence dispensaries in Nevada, and we have one Cookies on the Strip. So obviously we're going to choose Cookies on the Strip to be our designated lounge as well. So that's interesting to see in Nevada. And in Michigan, when they were exploring consumption lounges, they have paused that now. But when they were also going to allow food, similar to how West Hollywood is doing it.
Totally.
And
I thought, yeah.
Yeah, no, go for it. But
well, I was going to say, I found it very cool how the OG Cannabis Cafe got around the food not being served there with the outdoor patio and whatnot. I thought that was a really unique thing.
Yeah, that was like, I guess that was a very innovative and strategic move on their part. Like the parceling out was very interesting, but it kind of sucks now. Like they're not open, and I'm not sure if they will be opening. Like it's been very tough for the folks out here. So yeah, at least like the SoCal consumption lounge scene has not really been too exciting. I think cannabis industry business in general in California has been kind of a downer just because of the taxation and how much reform is needed right now. But at least in Illinois, where we do have our open lounge, we can provide snacks and food there. But I know you can't in SF and other cities that will be opening up lounges. So a lot of differences. We'll see how it all plays out. It's such a nascent part of cannabis, so it's like going to be a learning experience for everyone. But why wouldn't you not have food? You need to have food. I'm going to get the munchies. Like
100%. I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things that we're just getting dispensaries here in Corona, and there's only so many dispensaries that they're doing here. And really, one of the reasons they didn't do cultivation is because Corona's kind of built on top of itself and the smell and that kind of thing. So I think there'd be a good place to have consumption lounges as well. It's we have a location right here that's within the license zone and whatnot. It'd be interesting to see what Corona would say about a consumption lounge, what they would want under these pretenses, because I know the reason they're doing it is for the revenue, obviously, and as most cities are at the moment. But really, they've limited themselves to 12 dispensaries. What do they want to do, to drive more revenue? Consumption lounge seems to be something that is different than all the rest of the licenses available right at the moment too. So it's an additional stream of revenue for the cities or the county.
Exactly. But what's actually pretty interesting, just because of how slow some cities are being or how difficult some cities are being, there are loopholes, I guess, in the system. Per usual, people find those loopholes and make it work. So one example is Green Street in downtown LA. That's it's such an interesting concept. It's like a WeWork or weed work. And it's on top of a restaurant with a not cannabis theme, but it's called Gusto Green. And they literally have tempura hemp leaves. So it is very 420 friendly, to say the least, but you can't consume in the restaurant part. but you can consume upstairs on the other floors where it's the offices because it's privately owned. I find that to be very interesting. I wouldn't say it's the best way to execute a consumption lounge type establishment, but I do anticipate some others to kind of create a similar, I guess, business model where they don't have to go through the troubles of getting licensed. It's a headache for a lot of people, and I feel like a lot of folks are going to find any reason or loophole to avoid having to go through that license application process. And it's interesting seeing what Green Street is doing. They're having events, they have these offices, and that's their business model, but they allow consumption at that spot. So I'm curious to see, like, will that be the inevitable future of consumption lounge establishments where it's just, anything goes and there's no regulations behind it, or what? Like, of course, I think everything is going to be regulated in some way, but I think the privately owned spots, like that concept it's just going to keep thriving. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's an opportunity the city is missing out on.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. And I've, to the point about I was at the opening week of when it was Lowell Cafe and then became the little Goji Kid. I just remember sitting there again. I grew up in Kansas. So like the bar was set pretty low in terms of cool cannabis shit that you could do, like where I grew up. I remember sitting there, like looking around, just having like a surreal moment of like, I can't believe this is even like a thing that I can do this. And this is like allowed. And more importantly, that I was doing it in a work related environment. Right. And I think it's like, they always say it's never the easiest to be the first to do something, right? You're going to go out there and blaze a trail. You think about like heading west and covered wagons, like all kinds of crazy things. And one thing that I think is cool about the Green Street Cats, I'm pretty close with them in that regard. Shout out, shameless plug. They're doing a Green Street Festival in the spring that I think is going to be radical. The cannabis co-working idea that they have there is incredible. And they've got a lot of different cool brands. And it's like, I think that, it's going to be really cool to see different concepts, like you were saying, continue to like emerge from one another. That might be a little bit similar, but take a different spin on it. And it's like, especially in areas like downtown LA, which is really just like a hub for like progressive anything. I just, more so West Hollywood, to be honest. But, downtown LA in itself, I say that from like my traffic-free streets of Oregon. I have no problems up here.
Oh, man.
But yeah, it's going to be really cool to see how that evolves. And I think it's like that sundial. I say it all the time, but like, if you're too early or too late in the cannabis industry with anything, you're in the shade. But if you're at that perfect time where you can move around the clock and stay in the sun the whole time, it's great. And timing is everything. Location is everything, like you said. And so it'll be cool for sure.
One of my good friends, I'm going to shout him out. His name's Xander Abrams from Cannabis Policy Forum. He told me, he's like, would you have rather peaked 2 years ago, or do you want to peak in 2 years? So that's kind of how I'm approaching the progression of anything in cannabis now.
Sure.
Is, I think, being too early has been, like, I've seen being too early for some folks was detrimental. And I'm glad I did not like put all my eggs in one basket, like before the pandemic. So I'm hoping to peak in 2 years rather than have peaked already 2 years ago. So.
Being early is all the pain and twice the expense. It's earlier in life. In 2005, we had a kombucha-based energy drink. We're trying to teach everyone how to say the word kombucha. There's a booch bar on every corner. Marketing to teach people things is really, but that's part of what we're doing right now. And I think now is the right time for us to be having these conversations, to be at the table. And it's, in a way, we're measuring up to another starting line, right? It's the inevitable changing starting line that we all have to kind of belly up to and change with. So, like you said, it's going to be better to be coming up to our moment of the sun rather than have already had it, because this one's going to have a lot of people left in the dust. And then, as you mentioned, pioneerism, a lot of people end up, left in puddles and not ever heard from again on their way over to summit the Western Mountains, right? And so, it's
kind of why I'm at GTI, because when interstate commerce starts, whenever that starts, or when federal legalization happens, like it kind of sucks to say that it really is going to be the MSOs who will have the upper hand and the advantage, which really sucks for those legacy operators. And, I've seen these legacy operators like just absolutely lose everything. And it's so heartbreaking. But from a business standpoint, there's a reason why I'm at GTI. Like I've never been at a corporate company. So this is a very big move, but it's because like we're going to have a seat at the table when big changes in federal law, big changes in, interstate commerce, what have you, happens.
Right.
So yeah, that's my rationale. Because people are asking me, they're like, "Maha, you're a Cali girl, man. You trapped in the past. Like, what are you doing here?" But that's really my reason. Like, this is very inevitable. Like, it's gonna happen, and got to be with the right folks who are going to be at the right table. So that's what I'm anticipating. I really hope it happens sooner rather than later. I do not anticipate it in this administration or, in this current atmosphere, but it will happen, hopefully. And things are going to be so crazy. That's just going to finally, the cap will be off of the bottle because it's still turning. That's where we're at in this industry. It's like we're still twisting the cap off, and it hasn't even been open yet. So that's what I'm waiting for, and I'm ready. I'm ready. Are you guys ready?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I know you guys at Dutchy are for sure. Like,
of course we're ready.
You're gonna have to come talk about.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, sorry.
Our entire existence is around trying to create easier access to legal cannabis for everyone, right? So like best believe that, we consider it part of our responsibility, as I know you do personally and professionally, to keep that train moving forward. And so I can't be more excited for what's to come. Even if it doesn't happen in this administration, I think that we're building a business case for at least like more meaningful things to come, like, on a state level, decriminalization and getting records expunged and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of things that people are refusing to wait for the federal side of that, which I'm excited to see. And so like with that, I think it's going to be a great future ahead. It's always like you said, if your best days are behind you or your best days are in front of you, your approach is dramatically different in terms of how you look at things. And so you'd rather peak 2 years from now, because I don't know what 2 years from now is going to be. Right. But absolutely.
Yeah. No, all these, both GTI, Dutchy, relatively youthful in their businesses in general, right? As is the cannabis industry itself, the word industry behind what we're doing. And it's coming more and more to fruition every single day. Really, I think where we get in front of this is where the people who are being persecuted in states that don't have laws actually don't have to worry about that type of thing anymore. But realistically, like you said, you've got to roll with flow and be where it's at to be a part of it anymore. And again, boiling back to the beginning of the conversation, Maha, you've done what it took to be part of the conversation relevantly with a big company. And by the way, just to throw out kudos, this is not an investment show. It's not something as to where, we talk about stock market very often or whatnot, but GTI is kind of a bright, shiny light as far as when it comes down to stocks right now and performances. And I know your Q4 and your annual revenues, you were up quite a bit, and your year over year was great. And so I know, we're not here to break down or get into the analyses of this, but realistically, kudos to you and your company for doing some things right in a time where it's tough to find people going in that direction, right? Whether they're MSOs or mom and pop companies. So kudos to you and the people over there, your team over there at GTI.
A good sign. It's definitely affirming my decision to be here. That's for sure. Like, there's proof in the pudding. And, I couldn't be happier.
Totally. Nice. Well, they're lucky to have you. And obviously, we appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
You bet. And so, kind of in closing here, where can folks find out more about GTI lounges? Obviously we've got a very active listener base.
Oh man, I'm very active personally on Instagram. Very easy to find me. I am Maha, as in HIGH Maha. I post a lot of my cannabis adventures on there,
Totally.
whether it's events, work, anything. And of course, GTI, they're also on all social media platforms. Very easy to find them. GTI Grows is their handle. We've got our Rise and Essence dispensaries all across the nation. Our flagship is our consumption lounge as well in Mundelein, 40 minutes north of Chicago. So please check it out. Make a reservation on 7 rooms. It's an experience that you must not miss if you are in the Chicago area. And of course, Cookies on the Strip Lounge coming soon. Don't know when exactly just yet, but it'll happen and it'll be a wonderful experience. But yeah, keep following me. I post my adventures, I post updates, share the fun stuff, and sometimes the ugly side of the job sometimes. But you know, it happens. You got the good, bad, and the ugly. But yeah, hi Maha. I very active on Instagram. I'll try to be active on Twitter someday. We'll see. But we're starting off with Instagram. Twitch, maybe? I don't know. We'll see.
Totally. Nice. Well, it would be great to check back in with you here, you know, in the next couple of months and see how things are going. We'll check in. We'll have a conversation about federal legalization, like we talked about before. Might not be happening, but on a state-by-state level, how consumption lounges are going and doing that kind of thing. And yeah, before we signed off, I wanted to say thanks to everybody in the comments. You know, the comments have been going crazy. Got a lot of people talking back and forth. And again, thank you for everybody tuning in and being a part of the conversation. We will be short John for the next couple of weeks, of which is exciting, and you know, I'm scared to go. I've never flown solo before. I've never flown solo, but we've got a couple people that are going to be joining us here in the office and that kind of thing. So I'm very excited to show you guys a few of the things that are coming on. Maha, I definitely want to get together with you and talk about this location here. We're talking about the consumption, but you know, we'll save that for a different time. And again, Maha, thank you so much, just like John said, for joining us and taking time on your Friday. It's been a great weekly roll up, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me here, guys. This has been super fun.
We appreciate you coming out. Totally. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
All right.